So we said we would be speaking to the Prime Minister. We can do that right now, who joins us from the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. Very good morning to you, Prime Minister. Thanks very much for joining us here on Breakfast.
Good morning, Louise. Very good to be with you.
OK, a couple of things to talk about, obviously, in the headlines today. Should we talk about the armed forces first of all? Why do they need extra protection against legal claims?
Well, our armed forces do a fantastic job for us. They serve with distinction around the world. They wear their uniforms with pride. They go out there, they put themselves on the line for us to defend us. They do things that most people wouldn't be willing to do. And I think it's only right that we say to them that the government is on their side and that we recognise they want to have the confidence to be able to go out there and do the job that they have to do. Now, of course, if there are credible allegations of criminal behaviour, that should be investigated. But what we've seen growing up in the last few months and years is a whole industry of lawyers using human rights legislation to chase after our troops and to try and bring claims against them, many of which are vexatious claims. We want to put an end to that, and that's what we're talking about. It's about putting our faith in our troops and showing that government is on their side.
Let's also talk about doctors, because that's very much, again, going to be in the headlines today. We understand that Jeremy Hunt is going to talk about 1,500 more medical students a year. Where does that extra investment come from? Is it extra investment?
Yes, it is extra money going into the training of doctors, and there's a very good reason for this. We want to see more British doctors in the NHS. The NHS is having to ensure that doctors can come in from overseas in order to ensure there are the numbers of doctors we need. And there are people here in the UK who may want to train as doctors who aren't able to because of the limits that have been on the numbers. I think it's absolutely right that we're doing this. It will mean that we will see more British doctors in the NHS.
And of course, the obvious problem with that is we all know how long it takes to train doctors. So what happens in the interim?
Well, it will take time to train doctors, and obviously as the numbers for training increase, then gradually those doctors will come into service in the NHS. In the interim, of course, the hospitals will continue to ensure that they have the doctors that they need, and some of those doctors will come from overseas. But, of course, what we're also saying to doctors is that if the taxpayer is helping to fund their training, then they should stay and work in the NHS for a short period of time, for a few years after they have trained.
I'm wondering if you accept concerns, real concerns, whether you think they're real or not, about the NHS being really stretched at the moment. Would you agree with that?
I think the NHS does a fantastic job for us. I think it is important for us to look at the amount of money that our hospitals are having to spend on agency staff, many of whom are coming in from overseas. And that's why it's right that we have done two things as government. Under David Cameron's premiership, of course, the government looked to expand the number of nurses, people who can train as nurses. I think that's right. Now Jeremy Hunt and we have looked at the issue of training doctors. We want to see the NHS able to recruit doctors and nurses from here in the United Kingdom, and that's what these extra numbers will enable them to do.
And what about, and you've talked about us relying on overseas workers. Can you reassure those doctors, for example, nurses, other staff working in the health service from overseas, that they're welcome to stay here in that interim period?
Well, yes, there will be staff here from overseas in that interim period until the further numbers of British doctors are able to be trained and come on board in terms of being able to work in our hospitals. So we will ensure that the numbers are there. But I think it's absolutely right, as we look to the future, that we say we want to see more British doctors in our health service. Those people who want to train as doctors, who are perhaps stopped from doing so at the moment because of the limits on numbers, this opens up opportunities for them. And it also will be a benefit to the hospitals to be able to have a larger pool of British doctors.
I want to pick up something that you mentioned right at the start of your premiership. You talked about those who, and you called them just managing. So in your view, who do you mean by that?
Well, I think anybody who is watching this programme, who is at the moment about to, maybe somebody's coming home from a night shift while their partner's going off to work during the day, they've got 2 or 3 jobs, in order to make sure that they can make ends meet. They're struggling with balancing all the balls in their life, and they're in work, but perhaps they don't feel they've got job security. They've got a home, but they worry about paying the mortgage. These are the people who out there who know that this government is going to be on their side, because what we want to ensure is that we have a country that works for everyone. That means an economy that works for everyone, where everyone plays by the same rules, where the benefits of economic growth are spread across the country. But I also want to see a society that works for everyone, where everyone is able to go as far as their talents will take them, where what matters for your future is your hard work and your talents.
OK, let's just pick up some of those points. So I kind of want an idea. Is it that they'd have more money in their pocket? Is it they'd wouldn't have to work so hard? What policies are really going to make a difference?
Well, let me outline one of the policies that I've already spoken about. I think there are many people who are worried about their children, who worry about whether their children are getting that good quality of education that's going to enable them to develop their talents and take on opportunities in life. And what we want to see is more good school places. And I've already spoken about how we can open up the system, introduce more flexibility, increase the number of good school places, so that parents have the confidence of knowing that at their local school, their children are going to get the education that's right for them. They're going to get the opportunities to develop their talents and to get on in life, to be whoever they want to be.
It's been a pretty tumultuous few months. You've gone from being Home Secretary to Prime Minister. What surprised you most about the job as Prime Minister?
Well, I'm tempted to say that I think obviously it's a different job. It's not got a big department as I had with being Home Secretary. But I seem to be asked to do an awful lot more selfies these days.
And what's your reaction when you're asked?
I do quite a few of them, but I can't manage to do all of them. I'm afraid time doesn't allow me. There have been quite a few selfies here at the party conference, as you might imagine.
I can imagine that is the case as well. And how, just a final question, a sort of human level really, how do you unwind?
Well, I've always unwound by, cooking, walking, these are things that I do. I don't get quite so much time to do those these days as I did in the past, but whenever I can, my husband and I enjoy walking, and I enjoy cooking. And he enjoys eating what I cook.
I love the way you sort of say that with gritted teeth. He really does he?
He does indeed, yes.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister Theresa May, thanks very much for joining us here on Breakfast this morning. Thank you.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.